Alright guys, and welcome to another video. So you want to be a warlock in the Burning Crusade. You want to absolutely top the DPS meters because that's what everyone says warlocks are the absolute kings of doing, and they are simply the most overpowered class throughout the entire expansion. Well, obviously there's a little bit of a catch to that, so today I'm going to give you my honest advice for people who want to play a warlock in TBC. By the way guys, I am streaming on Twitch these days, so if you want to give me a quick follow, that is in the description. Now, if you truly want to top the DPS meters in the Burning Crusade, you will and absolutely have to craft the Spellstrike and Frozen Shadowweave sets. Well, actually you only need one piece of the Frozen Shadowweave gear. If you don't buy these sets off the auction house or go through the effort of crafting them yourself, then you probably won't do that much more DPS than a mage or an elemental shaman, especially if that elemental shaman or that mage have gone through the effort to craft their best in slot crafting gear. So you're going to have to craft this gear, and it costs an immense, and I mean an immense amount of gold. Okay, on a fresh private Burning Crusade server you're going to spend 8 to 10,000 gold getting all these gear pieces. Now in Classic WoW, obviously the economy is significantly more inflated. I wouldn't be surprised if the cost was double or triple that. Now you will need the tailoring skill grinded up to equip the Frozen Shadowweave gear, but you don't need it grinded up for the Spellstrike gear. But you definitely want to go for tailoring anyway. So yeah, like if you're preparing for TBC right now, I would re-roll to tailor it. Now let's talk a little bit how to actually obtain this great pre-raid best in slot gear that will be, you know, equipped on your character for a good strong year. You're only going to start to outmatch this gear when you start getting tier 6 pieces from Black Temple. And a simple reason why this gear is so good is it has a lot of gem slots, it has a lot of spell hit, the Spellstrike set has a cheeky little proc, and the raw spell power is simply better than a lot of the raid gear that you can obtain in tier 4 and 5. So let's talk about how you obtain this gear, because it definitely isn't a walk in the park, right? If you're going to go through the effort of making it yourself, right, and you really pull your pants up, you will probably be able to get it all equipped within 3 to 4 weeks of the launch. Maybe the second week if you work together with your guild and you're a guild leader and have a lot of resources at your disposal. But for most people it is going to take you a month, unless you're extremely rich or a guild leader, to get all this gear sorted out. Now the pieces you want to make first are the Spellstrike set. So I've been talking a little bit with Crix on Discord, who is obviously a very experienced TBC warlock. You should check his channel out, I'll definitely put that in the description. The reason why you want to make Spellstrike first is because of the spell hit rating. Now warlocks need a ridiculous amount of hit rating. They need 202 unbuffed, with, you know, they don't have an elemental shaman in the group. It's a little bit less if you have an elemental shaman in the group, but nonetheless they need a lot of spell hit, to the point where you're almost equipping spell hit on nearly every single gear piece that you have, because obviously if your spell misses then you don't do damage, and then you don't crit on your Shadow Bolts either, so your entire crit stat is totally wasted too. So to make the Spellstrike set, in total you're going to need 20 Spellcloth pieces, okay, and you can only make one Spellcloth every 3.5 days without the Specialization. If you get the Specialization, then you can make 2 pieces every 3.5 days, so essentially twice a week. Now Crix tells me he doesn't normally bother crafting the Spellstrike set when he rolls on a fresh server, because you can just buy it off the auction house, but I think if servers in TBC Classic progress from Classic WoW into TBC, then this will be an extremely less practical option unless you are extremely rich. So you may want to specialise into the Spellcloth specialisation so that you can make 4 pieces per week. What's also very nice about crafting your own Spellcloth pieces is when you go to Neverstorm, right, and craft a Spellcloth piece, what happens is an elemental will spawn on your location, and when you kill it, it will drop quite a decent amount of motes of fire and motes of water and things like that. So what's quite nice about doing Spellstrike and Spellcloth is you get a little bit of your gold back. But obviously if you're crafting each and every individual piece yourself, it's just going to take you ages to get all that Spellcloth required for your Spellstrike set. So what you can do is also craft Mooncloth pieces. Now you don't need Mooncloth pieces, only healers need Mooncloth pieces. So you can craft again a Mooncloth piece once every 3.5 days, and then trade that with a healer for a Spellcloth piece, because they'll probably be crafting Spellcloth pieces too to trade for Mooncloth pieces. So what happens is everyone just trades the Spellcloth cooldowns in TBC to get their best in slot gear. So my advice is to make the effort to basically make every single Spellcloth cooldown and keep making it every 3.5 days. And then apart from that, you can also buy some extra pieces from the auction house, but like I mentioned before, they're probably going to be extremely expensive with an inflated TBC classic economy. Now I've also got your Frozen Shadow Weave to sort out. I would only recommend ever getting the boots. The reason for that is because Warlocks have priority on getting tier 4 gear, okay, and when you get shoulders and chest tier 4 gear, which is very nice because it has spell hit on it and it has loads of gem slots, and then when you get 2 pieces you also get a shadow damage proc effect, which is also very nice. Honestly, going through the effort of crafting every single Shadowcloth piece isn't really worth it in my opinion for like an extra 2% more DPS. Personally, I'd save the money and just get tier 3 pieces. This means you will only need 8 Shadowcloth pieces, and obviously you can make 1 every 3.5 days. So overall, when you're doing it entirely on your own, it's probably going to take you at least 4 to 5 weeks to get everything crafted, and that's if you start on day 1. If you are not buying extra pieces from the auction house because you can't afford it, but if you can afford it, then you can probably get it done by week 3 to 4. However, there is a way to make the process even faster so that you can obtain the gear within, again, like the second week. I think some people could even get it within the first week if they really pull their pants up with making many different tailoring alts. So let's talk about that. So if you already have some alts, you can re-roll them to tailoring before TBC launches, get the skill grinded up to 300 ready for TBC. So you actually only need a character at level 50 to get the, I think it's master tailoring, basically TBC tailoring, but you need them to be level 60 in order to get the specialization. So that's a little bit of an advanced tactic for you. And if you don't have any characters, any alts or anything like that, what you can do is just power level a load of mages or pay for boosts or everything like that. Get a load of characters level 50 to start using their own extra cloth cooldowns, because they require 350 tailoring skill to actually craft. Okay, so what you're going to also have to do is grind a lot of Netherweave cloth on your main character in order to send over to your alt characters. Or if you're rich, you can totally deplete the auction house, because Netherweave cloth, to be honest, when TBC launches, it is going to be very bountiful, so you probably never run out of Netherweave cloth from the auction house, and it probably won't be too expensive. You can take this even further to the next step, but at this point you really do need help from your guild, so this is really more of a guild leader tip. What you can do is you can take these alts to get the Spellcloth or Shadow Specialization to increase obviously the amount of cloth that you get per cooldown. Okay, you will have to be level 60 in order to actually accept the quest in Shatterer's City, in the lower city. Okay, and what you're going to have to do is actually move to a very high level area in order to actually complete the quest, so you will have to be careful. Probably need to get some guildies to help you to actually complete the quests. Obviously, if you're doing this just with a level 50 character, you will need a guildie to summon you to Shatterer City in order to get all the tailoring training on all of your alts, okay? And then, remember, when you're crafting a Spellcloth piece, that an elemental spawns, and it will attempt to try and kill you, so what you can do is you can summon it in front of the big bruiser guards in area 52, and they should take it down for you, and there should be probably other players there that will probably kill it there for you too. So let's say for instance you have 10 characters now with the Spellcloth cooldown, with Spellcloth Specialization. You can very easily craft 20 Spellcloth pieces in one go. If you have 5 alts, it will take you a week because you'll have to rely on 2 cooldowns. And then also if you're crafting your Mooncloth on top of that, you can get extra Mooncloth to trade for Shadowcloth, and then you can also craft a Shadowcloth cooldown. So overall, if you have about 10 alts, you can get it all crafted in basically a few days. If you have 5 alts, you can get it more or less done in about a week, maybe 1 week and a half. But obviously that is next level try hard kind of gameplay. Now lastly, I want to talk a little bit about what specialization you should play while jumping into TBC. So in tier 4 raiding, all the specs are fairly equal, okay? Eventually the hardcore Shadow Bolt Warlock will take over when it gets good gear and will trump the other specs, but my advice would be to try out the other specs first and have as much fun as you can with those interesting other specs so that don't just spam one button over and over before you have to switch over to the Shadow Bolt spam spec. But by the way, recent theory crafting has kind of found out that you don't actually spam Shadow Bolt 100% of the time. When you're in Shadow Bolt spec, you will actually use Immolate a little bit as well. We'll talk more about that in a future video. Again, you should check out Crix's channel for information on things like that. I mean, my advice, because I've done this myself, is you should check out playing a Fire Warlock. It is my favourite spec to play in TBC, well, one of my favourite specs anyway, because you have a diverse rotation of at least 3 core abilities and just a simply little bit more of an interesting playstyle. You can also play Affliction Warlock, which one is very useful in a raid actually, because you're mainly a tank support class because of a damage reduction debuff that they apply to the boss, which smooths out the damage on the main tank, and you also help out the tank a little bit with your imp and improved imp talents, obviously with stuff like Blood Pact and Fire Shield, which are quite cheeky. So yeah, overall you are a great tank support spec, but because you are a tank support spec, it means you will never be in a DPS group with, you know, fat shaman buffs and stuff like that. Yeah, but just a slight downside. On the plus side, you don't need as much hit rating because you have a talent that increases your hit rating with affliction spells. Another downside is that obviously there's an increased debuff limit in TBC, but there is still a limit. When I was playing Affliction Warlock, I did notice my debuffs falling off from time to time in a 25 mana raid. You can also play Demo Spec, which is similar to Affliction but more focused on pet control in order to maintain high DPS, because, you know, it's probably the spec with the highest skill ceiling, since the pet management is absolutely vital to maintaining high DPS. But what's interesting about playing Demolition is you have much more increased spell power, spell resistances and stuff like this because of the weird demonology deep talents. And overall it's a fairly decent spec to play because you can, you know, do decent DPS in dungeons and raids, but then like if you want to go out gold farming, you can just go out gold farming because you've got a demon to soak over damage for you. Because a lot of the time when you're, you know, trying to do solo content in the other specs, you can struggle a little bit, particularly if you're in a destruction spec without the backlash talent. But anyway, so honestly, for the most of tier 4, I would not recommend going to your hardcore Shadow Bolt spec. I would recommend checking out the other specs, probably mainly Affliction or a Demonology spec, simply so you can keep jumping in between raid content and solo content for, you know, farming reputation, farming gold and everything like that. Unless you have the gold to respec, in which case, you know, just keep respecking. So have some fun with the other specs before the Shadow Bolt spec becomes so overpowered that it begins to trump the other specs. I mean, you can, you know, go for the effort of pulling your pants up to make the other specs work, you know, and prove that they're just as good and prove everyone wrong, but you know, that is up to you. Personally, I have found that honestly the Fire Warlock spec is actually fairly decent and just as good as a Shadow Bolt Warlock, especially when you don't have a Shadow Priest in the group and you have a Fire Mage in the group, and then because they provide 15% extra fire damage with the Shadow Fire Invulnerability debuff, whatever it's called, it's improved Scorch talent, you know what I'm on about. And obviously if there's no Shadow Priest in a group, then you can't buff with Shadow Weaving talent to, you know, increase your shadow damage by 15%, so that extra 15% damage on your fire spells just makes Fire Warlock take over the Shadow Bolt Warlock, which is just, you know, fairly decent. So you may as well take advantage of it while you can. But anyway guys, that is my honest advice for a Warlock in TBC. If you like the videos, please consider subscribing. I roughly upload 3 to 4 TBC videos every week. My name is MetaGoblin. Until my next video, ciao.